I think we'll get started with our afternoon speaker. I had the pleasure of meeting Heather through the Anthem Chamber of Commerce. I've heard her speak here at the Civic Building. I thought it was a great topic to hear her journey and her story that she wants to share with you today. I know she's available for questions afterwards. She does have a business here in Anthem that I know she'll tell you her location as well. So if we get a round of applause for Heather and enjoy her talk.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today. Well, today I'm actually going to discuss my own personal journey of practicing in Western medicine for over 22 years, quite content, and then very happy, and then having the experience of being introduced to one form of energy medicine. And it so changed my thinking that in fact now all I do is practice an alternative medicine. So let's get started. I like to call it the journey from Western to woo-woo. So first of all, I graduated in 1991 from nursing school from San Francisco State, and I became actually a labor and delivery nurse and really enjoyed what I was doing, so much so that I decided to go back and become a women's healthcare nurse practitioner. And I graduated in 1995. And as I was practicing, if we think about Western medicine and what it's about, what I'd like to do is talk about where our medicine comes from and how we treat science and research and things like that. And I think some of the best ways to discuss that are talking about one type of study. There are many, many different types of studies that we use in Western medicine. There's randomized controlled trials, there's ways of looking at certain things like outcomes, let's say from surgeries, or outcomes from any sort of thing in Western medicine. But I want to talk to you as one example of using double-blind studies. Have you guys heard of that term? Yeah. Okay, and so in double-blind studies, and an example that I'm going to use is a pharmaceutical study, or studying a particular medicine that we want to see if we want to get approved through the FDA and see if it works. So what happens is if I split up this room, and we can't split you up in threes because there's twos, but what we'll do is if we split up the room, and let's pretend there's threes, one section, two sections, three sections. What we would do is if you all had the same condition, let's say it's heartburn, if you all had the same condition, what we do with this group here is they're called the control group, and we don't give them anything. And then the next group, we would give them the medication that we're studying, and that medication we would not give to the third group. I'm not used to using a microphone. And then the third group, what we would do is in the third group is we would give them a placebo pill or a sugar pill. Now what we would do, it's called double blind because the person who's receiving the medication, this group over here doesn't know whether they're receiving the actual medication we're studying or whether they're receiving the sugar pill that this group is receiving. That's one part of the blind. The double blind is where myself as a practitioner, I don't know if I'm giving it to you, which one I'm giving it to you. You know, am I giving you the actual pill or am I giving you the sugar pill? And I don't know that, so that you can't read into my face whether you're getting the real pill or not. If I come up and go, here, I hope this works. You know, I go, oh, yeah, I hope that works for you. Oh, that's good. So you can't read into that. So it's called double blind. We look at that, and then if it gets the outcomes that we're hoping, which improves the heartburn, then we send that off to the FDA for approval. Also in Western medicine, what we do is if you came into my office and you explained to me what's going on, you explain the problem, why you're in the office. When you explain that to me, I take that through the filter of my training, and I listen to what you're saying, and I make what's called a differential diagnosis. So I'm coming up and thinking I know what's wrong with you. So what I'm doing, people are chuckling already. And so what happens is I look at that and say, okay, I think you have this. Then here is the treatment, the standard of care for treatment and medications. I prescribe you medication and you're on your way and we see if it works for you. And that's the model of Western medicine. So, as I was practicing in Western medicine, gotta get my hands straight. As I was practicing in Western medicine, I started having my own problems. I started having chronic urinary tract infections. And for those of you who've had a urinary tract infection, they're not a lot of fun. Yeah, people are like... So basically what happened was, I was treating women with this condition every single day. Now, granted, I have to say, doctors and nurses tend to make the worst patients. And I apologize for those of you who are practitioners in the audience. But it's true, because we like telling you what to do. That doesn't mean we want to do it. We like telling you what to do. So ultimately, though, for myself personally, I'm actually a pretty compliant patient. So everything I was telling my patients to do, from drinking lots of water to doing all sorts of things, I was doing, and I was still getting these infections. Now, when I was practicing, after you had 3 infections in a row, we would put you on what's called suppression. And suppressive antibiotics are half the dose of the antibiotic. We would take that you take it every single day. So I did that. I took it, she's just looking horrified. She's like, are you kidding? Is that what you do? The answer is yes. And so, yeah, you know. And so what happens is you take that, well, I have to tell you, it stopped the infections. It stopped me waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning in complete pain and bleeding. It stopped all that stuff, which was great. It worked. So fast forward about a year. About a year of trying to get off the medication. And every time I tried to get off the medication, it came back. I was frustrated because I was doing everything right. What am I supposed to do? Well, a friend came up to me and said, you know, I see this wonderful acupuncturist. This is 20 some odd years ago, folks. Okay, now I'm 50. Okay, so this tells you this is 20 some odd years ago. A friend came up to me and said, I see this acupuncturist. Why don't you go in and see her and see what you think? I looked at her and said, if that stuff works for you, great. But it's not scientific. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that, okay? Now, you keep fast forwarding a few months after that, and I was feeling terrible. And I got desperate. So what I did was I made an appointment with this acupuncturist, and I went in, and she looked at me, and she looked at my tongue and pulse, and I went, what is she doing? She looked at me, and she said, you know, you're really toxic on antibiotics. And I said, okay. And she said, well, we need to take you off the antibiotics, and we're going to put you on these little yellow pills. And when we put you on these little yellow pills, we're going to put you on some herbal teas that you have to make at home. And I looked at her, and I said, who am I calling, with all due respect? Who am I calling at 3 o'clock in the morning when I go off those antibiotics and I'm in pain? And she looked at me, and she wrote on a Post-it note her home phone number, and she handed it to me. Now, you think that would instill confidence in me? No. I looked at her and I said, great, I'll talk to you at 3. All right? So ultimately, I went home and I did what I was supposed to do. Because I figured, if I don't follow the instructions, who do I have to blame if it doesn't work? That'd be me, right? So ultimately, I was bound and determined that it wasn't going to work. So I went off my pills, went on her pills, did that, and I woke up at my usual time, not at 3. I slept through the night, and I was irritated. I was very upset. And you'd think I'd be jumping around for joy. Oh my God, this is great, it worked. I was so irritated. So I thought, yeah, one night, but come on, it's not going to really work. Guess what? It worked. Not only did it work, but I had to be on the herbal teas for about 7 months. So it wasn't a quick fix, but it was a quick fix from the standpoint that once I started it, it was years and decades before I had another problem with it. So this kind of wakes you up, doesn't it? It can't be placebo effect, because I don't believe it's going to work. And yet it worked. So ultimately, I decided I better learn something about this non-scientific stuff. Okay, and maybe I should learn a little bit more about it. And I did. I took about a year of training at the Pacific College of Oriental Medicine in San Diego, and took a year just to try to understand the medicine and where it came from. So I did that. Well, let's talk about Oriental Medicine for a bit. All right, gotta learn the equipment. So first of all, if we look at traditional Oriental Medicine, it's a lot older than Western medicine. It's about 2,500 years old. That's pretty old, okay? And ultimately, what was it based on? It was based on observation of illnesses and disease. So what we had is they had villages and things where they watched people who were sick. And they decided that they looked at these channels or meridians. Have you guys heard of that at all? Anyone heard of that? Okay, terrific. So ultimately they mapped out, and we'll talk about energy in just a minute. They mapped out these meridians all over the body. And on the body, in these meridians, there are certain points where you can access and stick an acupuncture needle. And the theory behind it is that chi. Have we heard of the word chi? Most of us have heard of that now? Okay. Well, it means something really different to somebody in Oriental Medicine than it does to us in this country, which is what I found really interesting. Basically, what it talked about was health is achieved through this free flow of chi. So, as an example, if there is too much chi in one area of the body and not enough in the other, when you're putting in an acupuncture needle, let's say in the arm, if you're putting in an acupuncture needle, you are moving that energy around and causing it to balance out. And when you balance out that energy, then the body will heal itself. A little bit different method. The body turns on and heals itself. A little bit different concept. That basically, by doing that, it will turn on, so to speak, and heal itself. Now, if we talk about chi and what chi means, it's very interesting because when I went to school to learn this, the funny part to me is that energy, we use that term, energy. And I think where we got it, I don't know for sure, but I think where we got this term energy from, and movement of energy, and chi is the movement of energy, comes from our own chemistry. We have molecules and our own physics, kinetic energy, and movement of molecules, and movement, because we're talking about movement. Now, if you said to somebody who lives in China, and you said, oh, you're going to give me an acupuncture treatment, and you're going to move my chi around and all the energy, and they'll look at you like you're from Mars. Reason being is because chi, from somebody who comes from Oriental Medicine, means something very different. It is a mixture of prenatal chi. Ooh, what does that sound like? That sounds like genetics, doesn't it? It's a mixture of grain chi, that's food, that's nutrition, and a mixture of air chi. Air chi is all the pollutant stuff in the air. That sounds a lot more down to earth than, woo, the movement of energy, doesn't it? And so what's interesting to me is that that means something really different. The other thing that was fascinating to me was in the observation of illness and disease, what they found was every organ had an emotion attached to it. And that was interesting. So they've noticed if somebody was suffering from a liver problem, they tended to be angry all the time. So that's so funny. So you're like, wait a minute, I know someone. You're like, wait a minute, what's going on with that liver? So ultimately, they attach every single organ that has an emotion attached to it. So when you're sticking in an acupuncture needle, you're treating both at the same time. You can't separate out emotions from the physical. So fascinating. So basically then, let's go into what is this energy medicine and what does it involve, okay? When we think of energy medicine, first of all, the way it's defined is it's defined by, it's considered a branch of alternative medicine. Now, alternative medicine means in place of. My practice is named Arizona Healing Alternatives. I use the term alternative as complementary, like it can be used in conjunction with, but technically alternative is in place of. If you look at the definitions from the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, it separates energy medicine into verifiable results or veritable energy and non-verifiable results or putative energy. So some examples that they give of this when I was looking this up is they call what we can prove veritable magnet therapy. Now what's interesting about that is I was looking at that and I looked at it again and thought, magnet therapy. Well, magnets is running magnets on you. I'm thinking, in my terms, MRI, magnetic resonance imagery. I'm thinking about, putting you in a tube and then having the magnets read that, but that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about that we actually can prove that, which you can see I'm even skeptical of that, right? But basically, magnet therapy, color puncture, I have no idea what that is. And light therapy. Light therapy, I understand though. Light therapy, if you think about it, when we know that people who live in areas where, unlike Arizona where you get all this beautiful sunshine, that there can be depression and other things if you don't get enough sunlight, but also I think of light therapy, especially from where I came from, when babies are newborns and get jaundice. And if you've heard of putting them under the Billy lights, we put them under little lights that break down the red blood cells and help them process that in their liver to get rid of the jaundice. So what they say is putative or not provable is therapeutic touch, healing touch. Have you guys heard of Reiki? Some other things that we can't prove. Great, people have heard of that. Qigong, even I would say Tai Chi would be considered you can't prove it. So there's a lot of different things. So this gets me thinking about provability. And as I start thinking about provability, it takes me back to a time when I had a really bad auto accident. When I was 19 years old, I was rear-ended off a freeway. Okay. And when that happened, I ended up cracking the windshield with my head. Thank goodness I had a seatbelt on, or I would have been out of that car. I would have been ejected out. Right? When that happened, I was sitting in front of my physician who said, okay, you're out for a year. You can't do anything. I had herniated discs, I had problems, neck injuries, all sorts of problems. And they looked at me and said, and back then, because this was, a long time, about 30 years ago, they basically said that, okay, you're on bed rest, you can't do anything, no school, no working, and it was a year. And during that time, the physician looked at me and said, okay, well, you'll probably need a really good massage, so let's send you to physical therapy. And physical therapy back then, 30 years ago, was considered cute. It wasn't considered standard like it is today, right? It was considered something nice, go get a massage, you're gonna be in pain, let's go do some physical therapy. So when I look at scientific things and what we can prove and what we can't and what we've been prescribing over the years, physical therapy now, we know all the science behind it. We know how good it is. We know that it's now almost standard of practice. So that's one thing I was thinking about. The other thing are two very important things that came out recently, and I'm so glad. If we look at provability once again, I love what Albert Einstein said, because I think he's a pretty smart guy. And Albert Einstein says, whether you can observe a thing or not depends on the theory which you use. It's the theory which decides what can be observed. That's a very profound statement. Because if I go into a study and I design it in a certain way to see what outcome I'm going to get, it depends on what the construct is of that study as to what I'm going to look at and see what comes out from it, correct? So that being the case, what I'm thrilled with, and this is actually on my website, the full articles, but I'll have them up here at the end if you want to take a look at it. But I've put in two very important things that I think we all need to look at. These are the links to that. I'm so excited to see some of this stuff come out. Well, the first thing is an article from the Stanford Medical Journal. And I'm so happy that Stanford came out with this. For those of you who are around when the hormone replacement scandal broke wide open in the 90s, okay, great, remember that, fantastic. I was practicing during that time, handing out hormone replacement therapy, and I knew something was wrong, and I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't quite put my finger on what was going on, it was just a gut feeling. And ultimately, Stanford now has come out with this article. Can you repeat that? And what this article is about, now I'm not Oliver Stone and I'm not into conspiracy theories, but this article mentions who designs the study and how it is designed in and of itself can skew how the results come out. Interesting concept. The other interesting concept on it is, and they sort of touch on this, is that if the pharmaceutical industry, and don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-Western medicine, I'm not anti-drug, and I have friends who are drug rats, but ultimately, if I'm a pharmaceutical company and I'm paying a university to do that study, okay, heads are nodding. That's a conflict of interest, isn't it? A bit? And that's a wide statement. Please don't sue me, drug companies. When it comes down to it, I'm not saying that that means the results are skewed and that's what happens. What I'm saying is that's not how studies used to be done. And in this article, Can You Repeat That?, they've started to take some of these studies and some of these drugs or some outcomes from surgeries, and they're looking at this and saying, we're trying to reproduce the results of the original study and we're not getting the same thing. And Stanford's actually outed themselves saying, yeah, we were funded too, this is what happened. So this is a very interesting read when we talk about our science and where it comes from. It doesn't mean that all of our stuff is skewed or that all of the stuff in Western medicine is bad. It doesn't mean that at all. But what it means is we need to question. We need to question and know what's right for us and where our science comes from. The other article that I love, and this just came out in summer of 2016. The other article that I love, we used to tell patients when they come into the office and they had depression as an example, and they had depression, we would tell them, we knew going outside would help. We'd say, you know, it might be good if you went into the garden, you do that. And I thought at the time that that came out because of sunlight. We talked about the sun, and we talked about, how helpful it is to get sunlight. So I thought it had to do with that. But then I kept hearing buzzings about sticking your hands in the dirt. I'm not going to suggest to you when you walk up to me, you're depressed, go stick your hands in the dirt, have a good time, let me know if it works. Okay, that sounds good. But ultimately what happened was, we were saying, but people say, well, I garden with, gloves on. I'm like, no, you need to stick your hands in the dirt. And we didn't know why. All of a sudden, this is called the Nature Cure, and this came out of the Atlantic. This came out in October of 2015. Guess what? They did a study, and they found that if we think about the skin is the biggest receptor organ of our body. It's an organ. And if you think about that, it absorbs things. We would put lotion on, right? We have lotions or patches for hormone replacement or patches for nicotine. It absorbs. What they found was there's a mycobacterium in the soil that is absorbed through the skin. And guess what it secretes? It secretes serotonin. The very thing that's an antidepressant. So now I feel a lot more comfortable if you come in and you're depressed, telling you to stick your hands in the dirt. Okay? But I didn't feel very comfortable until I had the science. But yet it still existed and it was there. Okay? So things that we can't necessarily prove, or maybe we can prove them but we haven't studied them yet because, we don't study these things. And a lot of you can come up with why you think the reason for that is. But ultimately, what I'm really happy of is that U of A, University of Arizona, Gary Schwartz down there, is starting to study some of this woo-woo stuff. And what I love was one of the studies that he did was he separated out and he found that he took a Reiki practitioner, a Reiki master. Now Reiki, what oftentimes they do is it's movement of energy, but oftentimes it's not putting the hands on the body. Okay, and have some of you heard of that? It's wonderful. And what's interesting with it is that he put in a room a group of people who had a sham practitioner, a practitioner that had no training whatsoever but was a good actor or actress. And then what he did was he had a Reiki master. And he hooked up their hands to see what type of frequency, what type of energy frequency came out their hands. Now, with the practitioner, the sham practitioner, he noticed, it was one specific frequency. And it stayed the same, no changes. It was 2.1, I believe, gigahertz. And he showed that in the Reiki practitioner, the energy was moving. That hertz is going back and forth and changing all over the place. So what did that prove? Something different is happening, right? So he's starting to study some of this stuff, which I think is wonderful. So now back to me with my practitioner. So if I didn't think that taking the herbs and the acupuncture and all that stuff was weird enough, the woman starts grabbing my arm. And she starts holding points. It's going to be hard to do this with my phone. Holding points. I don't have 8 arms. Holding points on my body and testing the strength of my arm. This is called applied kinesiology or muscle testing. Has anyone ever heard of that? Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Okay, I used to give this lecture and no one had even heard of it in the room. So this is good. It's starting to change, which is wonderful. So basically, she's doing this and she's testing me and reprogramming physical and emotional conditions. And I'm thinking, this is insane. This is crazy, but it's working. Now, am I going to go tell everybody about it? I'm glad it's working for me. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go yeah, really? Okay, she's nuts. Are you kidding? I'm not going to go talk about this. But ultimately, she starts doing this stuff, and if you see the little box there, that has to do with me and my progress at this point. Because for me, I was quite content in my little Western medicine box. I was happy there. Leave me alone. I want to practice where I am. I'm doing fine. I'm perfectly content. Well, now all of a sudden, it was bad enough that I had to peek out of that box with acupuncture, but now you're taking me to this. Now I'm so far out of the box, I'm in Milwaukee. You know, I have no idea that I'm so far out of this. So, what is this stuff? Well, what's fascinating to me is the applied kinesiology, and there are different ways of using it. There's a lot of people who muscle test, as it's called, and there are different ways of using it. Okay? This particular way that she was using it, how I use it, is in a form or a healing method called Total Body Modification. So what is that? Total Body Modification was invented by a chiropractor to save his wife's life, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But it's based on the theory that if you're muscle testing something, let's talk about a reflex. If there's a hot stove, and I stick my finger on that hot stove, what's going to happen? That's a reflex. So from my finger, there's a nerve that travels up my spine, goes to the brain, tells the brain, that hurts, please stop. And then basically, another nerve goes back down, innervates the muscle, causes it to contract, and so I pull my finger away from that source. All right, so that's a reflex. This man named Viktor Frankl, who invented this, he was a chiropractor, and he also was a naturopath, and he had some familiarity with Oriental Medicine or Acupuncture. So he was studying at the time, when this happened in 1974, with the founding fathers of applied kinesiology, Goodard and some others. And what he didn't like about it was he didn't like that it was long and drawn out and took a long time to even get anywhere. And he didn't like that. Well, let's talk about chiropractors and how they look at the body. Chiropractors believe in structure. So structure of the spine, if we think we have the brain, we have the spinal cord that runs all the way down, and we have the nerves that go, central nervous system, which is the brain, then it goes out in the nerves that come out through and innervates. All those nerves that come out through the spine go into your skin, your organs, your muscles, everything. So their theory is if the spine isn't straight, what happens is the body has too much nervous intervention in one area and not enough in another. What does that sound like? It's like chi, right? So they straighten out the structure in order to get the free flow, and then the body turns on and heals itself. So that's their theory. Well, all of a sudden, Viktor Frankl's wife, in '74, has an ectopic pregnancy. Do we know what that is? That's a pregnancy that's in the tube instead of in the uterus, in the wrong place, basically. And if that bursts, it can kill you. Well, that happened, and they had to save her life, which they did, and they pumped her full of a bunch of antibiotics. You have to, otherwise you could get an infection. So they treat her, and then later on down the road, she ends up with leukemia. And Viktor Frankl's theory at that point was that a lot of antibiotics can lead to leukemia. For those of us in Western medicine, that's pretty far-fetched, okay, because I get where he's talking about, but anyway. He decides that his wife, who's a nurse, says, I'm not doing chemo. Now what's interesting is I'm not anti-chemo, but she said, I'm not doing that, that's a poison, I'm not going to do that. So he's sitting there studying with all these people and decides he's going to start playing around with this concept and see if he can save his wife's life. That's where all this came from. And lo and behold, he does this, and they both passed away in 2010. Okay. After, I think, almost 50 years of marriage, something like that. It's on my website too. But anyway, so he developed this. So what is this about? Well, he figured, what if we don't use needles? What if we can access, as a reflex, certain organs or places on the body? So if I touch this part of the body and I test the muscle, I'm telling the body, hone in, and this happens to be the gallbladder point in Chinese medicine, along the gallbladder channel. And if I get a weak response, does that mean that you need to go get your gallbladder removed? No. What that means is that that organ isn't functioning to full capacity energetically, and that basically what we can do is reprogram the brain. His theory is everything is the brain. So, if we reprogram the brain, it will help the whole body send the proper signals and heal itself. So he started playing around with this, and there's a way of doing this. You take a deep breath, and what's so funny is you stimulate little points on the back. Down the spine, every bone of the spine, coincidentally, there's 2 acupuncture points. So he would stimulate that, hold the point, have the person take a deep breath, and then all of a sudden the point became strong. So he ran with that. And what's interesting, I don't have 3 hands, hang on just a second. So what he did was he mapped out a whole bunch of points on the body and ways to hold, ways to touch, ways to do different things. And lo and behold, this is where TBM was born. And there are all these different reflex points and all these different ways of holding them and all these different ways of stimulating the spine to do that, and it's completely non-invasive. Now, back when I was first getting introduced to this, I thought, this is too easy. Okay, really? So, at any rate, as we go through this, the body has an innate ability to heal itself, how that applied kinesiology works, and the stimulation of those certain points resets the brain to clear those blockages. All right. So now, as far as this goes, I'd like to do a little demonstration of this for you. We have such a large crowd, which is amazing. It's so great you guys are out here today. It might be easiest just to turn to the person next to you, can stand up, or sit down either way, and can somebody come up here and I'll show you this muscle testing. I want you guys to experience this. Would somebody mind coming up for me to do that? And I was like, yes, come on up. Okay, we've got 2 people at the same time, hang on. Hi, how are you? What's your name?
Clayton.
Hi, Clayton. Heather, nice to meet you. So as a way to demonstrate this, Clayton, what you can do is turn this way so they can see you. And then you can put your arms straight out, and then this arm down. Perfect. And I'm just going to try to push that arm down, so just don't let me do that. And it doesn't take a lot of force to feel that resistance. So say, my name is, and say your name.
My name is
And your name.
Clayton.
Say my name is Clayton. Go ahead.
Thanks, my name is Clayton.
Good. Don't let me push that arm down.
Push that arm down.
You're good. You're good. You're so good. And then say, my name is Heather.
My name is Heather.
Feel that difference? You see that? Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. So what did that just prove to us? Okay. Did you see that little movement there?
Yeah.
Okay. So for him, thank you, Clayton. That was so sweet of you to come up and do that. So that little response is the weak response. That some people, their arm drops. Well, why did it do that with him? His body knows his name isn't Heather. Okay, now unless unless he's wanted in 6 states and he doesn't know what his name is. But other than that, that's what this is about. The body knows. So we're looking for that difference. What I want you to do is pair up with somebody and practice that. Use your own name, saying my name is, and then do that with each other for about a minute. Have fun, guys. See if you can feel the difference. It doesn't matter left arm or right arm. Makes no difference. And once again, guys, it's really important. Anyone can power down somebody else's arm. Okay, so we're not looking for wrestling. We're just looking for a change. Very light touch. Can anyone feel that? You guys are laughing. Isn't it amazing? It's really neat. Very good, guys. You're all set. I love it. I see. So how many of you could feel a difference? And now we're in here, and a lot of people are like, I'm not sure. Very good. Cool party trick. Say that again? Yeah, okay, someone asked if you've had a gender change. Okay, we're not Alright, so thank you guys for doing that. So what's interesting about it is, like I said, anybody else can power someone's arm down. So if I had a certain opinion as to what I wanted to come out, I can make it do whatever I want. It has to do with just really putting yourself to the side and just, because people say, oh, that's so subjective. How do I tell? It takes a while to learn that skill, but it's really a lot of fun. So, what happened with this was one of Viktor Frankl's students actually went on and said, wait a minute, in Oriental Medicine, we know that every organ has an emotion attached to it. So that being the case, he said, if we're doing this for physical conditions, why can't we do this for emotional stuff? So one of his students went on and created an emotional reprogramming technique. Now, with that, let me give you an example of emotional reprogramming. When I was working with my practitioner, after I had spent a year and I was out from my auto accident when I was 19, I would get in the car, I'm completely fine. I don't have any chronic pain left over, no residual pain, I was fine after a year. And then I would get in the car, and when I got in the car, a rock would hit the windshield. And all of a sudden, I would get this horrible pain in my head. And I'd have to pull over to the side of the road. What do you guys think's going on?
Flashbacks.
Thank you. You guys, you nailed it. Flashbacks are memory. The brain is the master associator. So I don't have any physical reason for the pain. But ultimately what would happen is my brain went through its categories of, wait a minute, what does that sound remind me of? It goes through the archives, right? Wow, you cracked the windshield with your head. And there comes the pain signal. There's no physical reason for it. So the emotional stuff is really, really fascinating, because once I had that done, thank goodness, because here in Arizona, a rock hits the windshield every 6 seconds. Okay? Right? Yeah, pretty much. I wouldn't be driving. Okay? So thank goodness that was reprogrammed. We sent the brain somewhere else neurologically, so it doesn't do that anymore. Yay, I'm in Hawaii when a rock hits the windshield. Fantastic. All right. So ultimately then, let's talk about what is this stuff and what are the risks of this and what do we do? Accuracy of it. Now we have to step back a little bit again. So ultimately, when I was working with her, she actually gave a layperson's version of how to do this muscle testing out of her house one weekend. And remember, I'm still in the phase back then of going, really? I thought, well, I got nothing better to do on a weekend, I might as well just go do this. So I went, and I had some training with her. And I thought it was cute. And then I would come up to people, let's say you had a sore throat. I'd come up to you and go, look, I learned this stuff. I know this isn't going to work. But if you want to give me your arm, let's play around a little bit. And then you look at me and go, hey, sure, Heather, I got a sore throat, no problem. And then I started playing around on people. And I played around on people. And I played around on people. And it kept working. And it was very irritating. It's very, very irritating. Because it's working. Okay? And as it keeps working, I'm more irritated. But ultimately, what happened was, at that point, was I was playing. So I went into the office one day. And she looks at me and she tests me and she says, okay, I'm getting that you're really anemic, and for this type of anemia is iron deficiency anemia, where the red blood cells are really small and you need to take more iron to get more red blood cells and more oxygen into the brain. And ultimately, she says I'm anemic and that we got to work on my gallbladder. And I'm not having any gallbladder pain. Okay? And I was thrilled that she said it, because I was finally going to prove this stuff wrong. I was so happy, because I said, see, this stuff isn't accurate. And let me tell you why it's not accurate. Because I just had my physical exam 3 weeks ago, and I've never had anemia a day in my life, ever. And my blood work is completely normal. And I said, and I'm thinking in my head, but I didn't say this out loud, which is surprising, because aren't you glad I'm not your patient? I didn't say, see, you just want my money. I didn't say that. I just said, oh, I'm feeling fine and I'm going to go, thanks. And I left. 1 to 2 weeks later, I had my first gallbladder attack. And I was in the emergency room. Okay? I'm in the emergency room, and I'm irritated enough. And the physician comes in and says to me, you know, we got to talk about your gallbladder, but wow, you're really anemic. You really need to take some iron. And I looked at him and I said, once again, would you like me to be your patient? I looked at him and I said, I'm sorry, can I see my results, please? I want to make sure it's my name and date of birth on that thing, because I don't know that I believe that. And he shows me the results. And I'm anemic, and I am really mad. So what happened? Well, I didn't know the statistic at the time. But Viktor Frankl said that a blood test cannot pick up until the body is at least 40% dysfunctional for the blood work to show it. But yet, muscle testing can pick up at a 1 or 2%. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't had it happen, except when I start running it through my scientific brain, and I start running it through this, I start thinking to myself, wait a minute. How many women come into my office and say to me they're in this perimenopausal range in their age, and they're saying, I don't feel like myself anymore. I don't know what happened to me, but I'm having hot flashes, I feel horrible, and my family wants to sell me because they don't know, where I went, and I don't feel like me anymore, and I'm agitated all the time, and I'm moody, and no one in this room is going to admit to any of that, including myself. Okay? But ultimately, I run blood work on you, and your blood work's normal. How many times does that happen? I saw that over and over again. My blood work can't prove it, but you're having symptoms anyway. So these sorts of things had to happen to me. And in fact, what's interesting to me is you fast forward 10 years, I practiced on people. 10 years until finally my friends came up to me and said, how much longer you need? How much longer do you need that there's something to this? And at that point, I went back and I actually was trained, and I was fortunate enough to be trained by Viktor Frankl before he passed away in 2010. And then I was also trained by his student for the emotional part. And then as we move on, with the emotional part, I thought it was a little bit limiting. And yet I was using some techniques and didn't realize that half of what I was doing was clinical hypnosis. And now I've gone back and I didn't realize I was doing that. I just thought it was limiting, and I just was adding stuff to it from being a nurse and guided imagery and all sorts of different things. And now I'm certified in clinical hypnosis. But at any rate, what can this be used for? It's amazing. For allergies, physical symptoms, pain, stress, anxiety, and then the emotional aspects. I've seen it do some amazing things. Before there was a medication for it, I've seen it take multiple sclerosis and put it in remission. And what's fascinating to me was that's what Viktor Frankl had touted. And he had people come up on stage who were in wheelchairs and now they're not. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Because I'm still skeptical even getting training, right? But I had a patient with this. And when I had the practice in San Diego, and what was fascinating to me was she came up to me going, gosh, Heather, I'm feeling so good and I'm feeling so great. I'm like, fantastic, that's great. She's like, oh God, Heather, I know it's you. Here, my lesions are gone. I said, that's impossible. She goes, I know it's you. Here's my scan. And I'm looking at it. To this day, I'm skeptical, and I think everybody should be skeptical, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But ultimately, I've seen it do some pretty amazing things. Okay, and I use it in conjunction with, it doesn't have to be in replacement of, it can be in conjunction with other therapies. All right, so we'll quickly dabble into hypnosis here because I just think it's fascinating because I had lots of misconceptions about it. I don't know about you, but when I think about hypnosis, this is what I think about. Okay, yeah. I think about the person standing there in front of the audience making someone cluck like a chicken. That's what I was thinking about when I thought about hypnosis. I thought, do I really want to go get certified in that? I mean, isn't that what it's about? No, it's not. Yes, can you do that? Can you do that and make someone cluck like a chicken in the audience? Absolutely. That's called stage hypnosis. And that is a form of hypnosis, and it has its time and its place. Okay? But ultimately, what is it? So first of all, let's go through some myths of that. A lot of people go, oh my gosh, I'm going to do something against my will. Oh my God, you're going to make me do things. Well, first of all, just like with muscle testing and emotional reprogramming work, your body won't test to go somewhere that it's not ready to go and release. Similar in hypnosis, you can't force somebody to do something. So the sad part is the people that were clucking like chickens wanted to do it. Sorry, they probably don't want to admit that, but they somehow deep inside they kind of wanted to do that. Okay. So that's one thing. I won't remember what happened. I'll tell you where the gold is, or my lottery ticket, or you can't. It doesn't work that way. What happens is my favorite, actually, of these myths. There's, I have to be relaxed. My favorite one is I can't be hypnotized. I love that. When people say that, I can't be hypnotized. There's no way. Okay. My question to you is: have you ever been in a car and you've gone from point A and you got to point B? Can you remember the whole journey? Okay, none of us want to admit that, do we? Oops. Okay, can't remember it. Now, if hypnosis didn't work, then watching the TV and the commercials, okay, let's talk about that. There's certain brave wave lengths. I'm not going to try to say that 3 times. certain see, thank you, y'all need to help me, brain wave lengths that the body produces depending on the activity that we're doing. Right now, I probably can't be hypnotized because I'm walking around and I'm giving a lecture, right? You don't have to be relaxed to be hypnotized, but ultimately, I am in the process of actively doing something. The fact that I'm actively doing means I secrete a certain brain wave length. Now, when you watch TV, you go to the next level of a brain wave length. That level means you're more susceptible to things. If hypnosis didn't work, we wouldn't have ads on the TV. Because how many of you have been watching TV and you've eaten and this wonderful commercial comes on and you're not even hungry and it's this wonderful dessert and you're off to the fridge, okay? If hypnosis didn't work, we wouldn't, or how many? Oh, I don't need that, but I'm going to call QVC. Hang on. Okay, that's part of it. So what is hypnosis then? Hypnosis truly is being open to the power of suggestion. Because what are they suggesting? You really need that dessert. Or you really need those chips. You don't have any to do that. Ooh, you really need that. That's what it is being open to the power of suggestion. And it's about the subconscious and conscious mind, and I'll touch on that for just a few minutes. 5% of our brain is the conscious mind. And I love the submarine analogy. That is my favorite. Because what it describes is that 5% of our brain, that conscious mind, think of a submarine. And in that submarine, you have the submarine captain. That submarine captain, what is their job? Their job is to think negatively. They're searching for danger. They have the little periscope up, a real narrow field of vision. And what they see is that, oh, I'm looking for danger, right? So it thinks negatively, but it's only 5% of our brain, but it's the part that is the captain telling everybody what to do. So how many of you can accept a compliment? Okay, if I come up to you and go, oh, you look fantastic today. Awesome. That's what I want. Yes, that's what I want. But most of us, when we get a compliment, we'll go, what do they want? What are they after? What's going on? Right? Because that's the conscious brain protecting you, right? That's the captain going, something else is going on here. Well, what's fascinating is that the subconscious mind is the crew of the submarine. And that crew is the one that gets the job done. They get the job done. But they have the reasoning capacity of a 3 to 4-year-old. This is an issue. And if you think about, and a good example of that is, and that's 95% of our brain. If we take a 3 or 4-year-old child and we put them on a bike and they fall, what's that 3 or 4-year-old going to reason? I'm not doing that again. That hurts. I'm not going to do that. So then we have the adult, which is like the conscious mind that goes up and explains to the child, you have to get back on the horse, honey, you have to get back on the bike, it's going to be okay, yes, you can get hurt, but you'll heal, all sorts of different things to reason it, right? So what hypnosis does is it distracts that conscious mind, the captain, has them do other things while we get into the subconscious mind and give it different suggestions, because it's the subconscious mind that gets the job done. It's the one that if you tell it what to do and you give it different suggestions, that it gets the job done and helps us with all sorts of things to heal, to get what you want out of life. So that gives you an idea of what hypnosis is. All right. So now, to quote Albert Einstein again, the true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination. To raise new questions, new possibilities, and to regard old problems from a new angle requires creative imagination and marks real advances in science. Brilliant. So remember, you have to have an imagination, you have to branch out of your box in order to create new things, right? Or we never have, where we are today. And now, the next slide, I believe, is going to be, it's actually a testimonial. The reason I put it in there is just to expand horizons. This is not a commercial, but to expand horizons. And one of my patients was so sweet that she was willing to, she wanted to do this. So I've put this in here. And hopefully it will work. Let's see. Oh, hang on. Let's go back and see if it'll work. Hang on, I might have to do this on the computer. All right, let's see. Yeah, Yeah, and I'm not sure how to do it. But let's see. Yeah, it's not going to do it. Basically, what she was saying in that was that she was actually diagnosed with Lyme disease. And for those of you who've heard of it, she was actually diagnosed with Lyme disease, and she'd been put on antibiotics. And her sister actually first came in to see me for allergies, and she had cat allergies. So she came in because she had cat allergies, and we took care of that, and she was shocked because her sister had tried everything under the sun. And then with Lyme's disease, she wasn't feeling very well, even on the antibiotics, and she had seen all the experts. And in doing that now, she's doing great. And so she was kind enough to discuss that, because sometimes some of the most complicated things, it's amazing what some of this stuff can do. So, at any rate, what I will do is take any questions that you have now. I brought the room to a dead silence. And I'm glad. Yes.
Did you use the clinical hypnosis, or did you use other therapies to help her?
I use the TBM. I use the applied kinesiology with that, and in fact, in TBM, it's considered an allergy. Lyme disease is considered an allergy. So there's a whole allergy sequence that there's no shots, nothing like that. It's completely non-invasive. Use that. It's called a Lyme disease vial or allergy vial. Use that with her, as well as just getting the body turned on, checking every organ and getting it in shape. Part of what Viktor Frankl taught was structure. I'm not a chiropractor, so I don't do the spinal manipulation part, and I would send that out if someone needed it. But what he did when he trained us was he said, chiropractors on this side of the room, because you have to be a medical person to be trained. Non-chiropractors, that side of the room. And so for us non-chiropractors, he taught us some gentle aligning that we could do that can help do that. But if I can't get it, I refer out. But other than that, yeah, we used all sorts of different things with her. And it doesn't, to me, when people say, how long will it take? Okay. Well, that's what, yeah. Can I take a pill and just make that go away? Well, what happens is, and when you say with people on pills too, sometimes what I do with people is when they're on certain medications, I actually use that as an allergy. If it is an allergy, your body may not have an allergy to it, but if it does, and I don't mean a Western allergy, otherwise you probably know that, where you have, a huge reaction, but a reaction on a different level that may be ripping down your immune system or causing other problems, you stay on the medication. But yet if I clear the allergy, then you're not getting the unwanted sort of side effects from it, so there's that. But yeah, we use that. Any other questions? Did I answer your question? Okay, good. Next.
What about high blood pressure?
Yep. Oh, when you talk about correction, this book is what he created. Okay. There's a correction here for high blood pressure. Okay, and it's amazing to me. I'm like, where did he get this stuff? Because what's amazing to me is some of the corrections in here, but yes, there are blood corrections. Now, the question that I would have is it going to work for you? And when it comes right down to it, what I tell everybody, and one of the take-home messages I want from this, is whether it's my practice or someone else, it's not a commercial for my practice. What this comes down to is broadening our horizons. Do I want everybody in this room skeptical? You bet, okay? I'm skeptical to this day, so much so that I don't even look at the allergy vials when I'm testing somebody, because I don't want to cloud it. What was so funny was I picked up on someone, I picked up, can't remember, it was something like jellyfish. Really? I learned a long time ago just to trust the body, okay? And I said to this person, I'm sorry, I learned a long time ago just to trust the body, because I would get some reactions, and it was some chemical long before we had smartphones. And there was some chemical that I said, I don't even know what this is. Go research this, take it home, and research this. And the person would come back and say, oh my God, Heather, it's like in all of our foods and all of it, So I don't question anymore, but with jellyfish, I looked at him and said, I'm really sorry, but I'm getting jellyfish. He looked at me and said, oh yeah, I used to be a surfer. When I was in my 20s, I got stung a ton of times. I just stopped questioning. Anyway, go ahead.
How about dementia?
With dementia is a very different thing. With dementia, I would be interested. I have never worked on a patient, to be quite honest, I've never worked on someone with dementia. What would be interesting would be to see if there is any improvement. And gosh, I hope someday they study this stuff even. I want this stuff studied. Because in turning the systems back on in the body, would that help the brain in oxygenation? I don't know, is my answer to that. Honestly, I do not know, but I would love to see if some of this stuff could work. And when you talk about like number of visits, because I'll circle back to that, I've had someone tell me, oh, I spent 8 years with this practitioner, and I'm like, oh great, how did it go? They never got any better. I'm like, oh my God. Do I know if this technique is going to work for your body? No, but it isn't going to take 8 years to figure it out. No, I tell people if we spend 3 one-hour sessions together and there's no change whatsoever, I need to get you where your body needs to be to heal. I don't care if it's acupuncture, I don't care if it's physical therapy, I don't care if it's medications for dementia, I don't care what it is. It makes no sense to me to waste somebody's time or money. Anyway, that's another lecture altogether. Anyone else?
Is it true then that your mother sent you out to make mud pies that you were healthier?
I like it. He said, is it true that when your mother sent you out to make mud pies it was healthier? I would say yes now based on the science. Yes. Thank you, Mom.
How to eat them.
Okay, we didn't say eat them.
Do you have anything on diabetes?
Yes, there's a whole diabetes protocol, which is, I need more hands for that. I need like 2 people for that. But there is, what's funny, Victor actually put everybody on, and I don't dabble in nutrition anymore. There's, I leave that to the nutritionist. Every 6 seconds, ooh, coffee's good, no coffee's bad, no chocolate's good, no chocolate's bad. I can't keep up with it, it drives me crazy, but what Victor Frank used to do, and what I used to do with all my patients, was I put them on a sugar control diet, because what we do know, more and more, but years ago, I was the crazy one who went off sugar, and everyone thought I was nuts, but I felt better, that sugar is very inflammatory, and it causes problems. And I used to put people on a sugar control diet. I don't do that anymore, but I send people in the direction, and they changed it now into, what's the paleo? Oh, they change the name every 2. It's kind of like in Western medicine. I used to joke with my patients when we were dealing with infections. I'm like, hey, just when you have it down, we're going to change the name of it. Because we changed the name of certain infections like 6 times because we had more science behind it. I think we were just trying to sound good. I just think we're trying to sound good. Look, I'm going to use another term. In the back of the room.
Okay, Des, if you have a genetic disease such as muscular dystrophy, can that be helped with this?
He actually has
Yeah?
a DNA correction.
Really?
I'm sorry, I know it sounds crazy. I don't know. And this is like I said, I don't believe in bluffing. The bottom line is, I don't know. But I've used the DNA correction on people and seen things get better. I haven't specifically used it for muscular dystrophy, in all honesty. I mean, the most autoimmune thing I've seen is the MS, and we use the DNA correction. I don't know, and I don't know how he came up with it. I think somebody else has something to do with it, but that's a whole other issue. But, very good question. Any other questions? I know I'm running way over. You guys are like, okay, are we getting out of here too, or what? Any other questions?
Does Medicare cover your services?
I wish. Does medical insurance cover what I do?
That's a good question.
No, but someday, I mean, we're getting there. Look, when I first started, acupuncture wasn't covered at all. Physical therapy wasn't covered at all. Eventually, they'll come around. But for right now, unfortunately, and I'd love to be part of that movement and showing this to people, and so I'd love to be part of that because it needs to be just standard of care, like that you have a choice of what you do. You go into a place, you have a choice of whatever, and here are the positives and negatives, and you make that choice. It's my thing. But anyway, like I said, stay skeptical, but stay open, and thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Heather. Really appreciate that. I hope you all enjoyed that information.